sky's not blue.
Welcome back to the Cult House Podcast. I'm your host, the Scholar of Spite and the Saturday Night Delight, Roger Riddell. Joining me today, she is a keyboardist and vocalist who is currently the Mistress of the Macabre for Cradle of Filth, and she's also the vocalist and songwriter for Catalyst Crime, Zoë Federoff. How are you doing today, Zoe?
I'm doing great, but I wish I was the Scholar of Spite. What a title.
Yeah, it's I'd like to throw that in there because it's always kind of just cracked me up, but I kind of ripped that off from my friends in the band Kin Mode from Winnipeg. So
Ah,
they have a line in one of their songs where uh they say, I am that scholar of spite, I am that dark fiend. I think it's dark fiend. I can't remember now off the top of my head, but it's a line that just always cracked me up.
if I had business cards, I'd want them to say Scholar of Spite. That's just amazing. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I should do that. I should totally just get business cards made that say Scholar of Spite underneath my name with like everything else.
I mean, if you don't, I will. So,
Yeah, just to start out, congratulations on your recent marriage to fellow Cradle member Ashok. How has that been going?
thank you. Oh, it's been lovely. We're still setting up our house over here in Arizona right now, so it's a lot of work, the typical hassle of moving, but he's just lovely. And at the same time, we're writing new Cradle of Filth material. So I don't know what's better than creating heavy metal with the love of your life.
Yeah, no, I also just have always appreciated his stage presence and everything too, with the whole like pinhead like Cenobite getup that he does.
Yeah, the funny thing is that so many people love his stage presence and his theatrics on stage. And believe it or not, he's so shy in real life. Like it really is amazing how he blossoms on stage and becomes the Pinhead character. I admire it to no end.
Yeah, I mean that's really one of my favorite things about Cradle overall. Since I first got into them, I guess around like the from the Cradle to Enslave era, is that they kind of like Danny and everyone that's ever been in that band with him really embodies this sort of thing that Bruce Dickinson describes in his book as like the theater of the mind, because Cradle of Filth is taking you on a journey either sonically or through their stage show. And sometimes they're dragging you by your feet, like kicking and screaming through that journey, but they're really just sort of painting this whole like picture, and it's a full experience beyond just like passively engaging with it.
I don't think Danny Filth passively engages with anything, to be honest. I mean, so this is not a passive band full of passive people in general, and I think that it definitely comes out in the music and always has.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's all presented in a way that like the band is just like regular people. Like you kind of know that, but at the same time, you want to believe that they just stepped out of like a Clive Barker story, you know?
Two things can be true.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we all definitely are very real people, but at the same time, we're artists, and that always comes with a certain amount of theatrics, in our daily life too, which is fun, keeps it interesting.
Yeah. And joining the band a few years ago, did you kind of have to, step up a certain degree of theatrics in your on stage performance, or were you already like pretty I guess sort of like theatrical or performative in your other band, Catalyst Crime?
I mean, I've been on stage before. I will say one thing I really love about being in Cradle is that because I'm not singing as much as I do in Catalyst, I can spend more time just headbanging and windmilling and stuff. So that's fun.
Yeah.
There's just some really nasty, wonderful riffage going on, and I don't have to sing over it, and I can just rock out. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean Cradle is a pretty like vocally intense band. Just even with the female vocals, it's always very operatic, and then like Danny his voice has evolved from just like the shrieking and howling to like now Uh, it doesn't get as much recognition as I think it should, but he's got like a really impressive vocal range, and like that is something that I like that the band has always played off of between him and the female vocalist too.
Dan is such a unique vocalist in terms of what he can do vocally. And when you hear him at first glance, you just think, oh, another shrieker. And then you realize all the different tones and ways and the softness, like his soft, menacing whispers that I love. Dan is a very complex vocalist. I don't think it gets as much appreciation as it deserves, even sometimes. There are people like you who can analyze it and know what you're hearing. But there have been so many times when I've stopped people and said, no, no, take another listen to what he's doing here and realize how difficult this is. And then on the flip side, with the female vocals, I think a lot of people don't realize, especially the earlier era when Sarah Jezebel was writing, some of those leaps and intervals are ridiculously hard. For example, like her Ghost in the Fog, those staccati, the intervals in the staccati are really strange and difficult, actually. And because of that, I have so much admiration for what she wrote as the female vocalist earlier on, because it's actually much more than just your typical operatic stuff. It's really quite complex, and she was also a very impressive vocal writer in her own right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's going back to when Sarah Jezebel Devo was in the band, and then also up through Lindsay Schoolcraft and every other woman that's been in the band. I feel like Cradle is also a band that has always presented the idea of women in metal as a serious thing, whereas and this is like a thing that I'm glad that we've moved past, but I feel like when I was in like high school and college, you had like publications that would play things up like hottest women in metal, and it was always just kind of like a gimmick or whatever.
I think, no matter what, when you're doing extreme metal, there's a certain amount of gimmick to all of it, of course, because there's the imagery and theatrics around it, especially with having kind of a blackened imagery like we do. But it is good to see that women are not a gimmick at this point. And I really hate it when some bands still try to make us gimmicky. Because, for example, I don't want to throw too much shade on this, but I heard Mayhem Festival recently rebranded to be an all-female fronted thing. And while on the one hand, I definitely celebrate women in metal and I love to have attention focused on women's contribution to metal, at some point we got to stop treating it like, like just like you said, a gimmicky thing, that people are just listening to it because there's a chick.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's all like just really talented people playing music and like enjoying it. And I don't know, I like to think that eventually we'll be fully past having to just be like, oh yeah, this band has a girl in it, but
We're moving there. It's getting better, like you said. It's more accepted now, and I hope it just keeps going in the right direction.
yeah. So Cradle has a new album, The Screaming of the Valkyries, out this Friday, March 21st, or in my case, if the US Postal Service is to be believed, it's out for delivery for me right now. Um,
Hey,
how was the process of working on your first album in the band?
it was a lot of long distance collaboration, like a lot of modern bands, a lot of emailing and Dropbox links. And in the case of me, Ashok, and Donnie, we had 12-hour Zoom writing sessions. Like literally, I'd get up, open my laptop, and be on Zoom all day with the guys writing. So that was a new experience. But overall, I really loved it. Like, I think the collaboration aspect was a lot of fun. And I can say that, beyond being married to one of the guys now, Ashok, Donnie and Dougal are two of my best friends, and I love creating music with them.
Yeah, I mean, it is that's something that crossed my mind when I was, preparing for this interview is that Cradle really is like an international band at this point with like you're in Arizona, Danny's in England, there's members from like the Czech Republic and it does seem kind of like daunting to think about getting everyone on the same page, but it's also interesting that like technology has made that possible now.
Yeah, but I think that's been going on for a while, at this
Yeah.
point, because we're in the internet age, and actually there's some advantages to it because when you are trading emails back and forth, you have a chance to pause and figure out how you really want to respond, as opposed to if you're sitting in the same room with someone, you might be feeling a lot of pressure to come up with something instantly. So it gives breathing space to the writing process to be able to have it over distance. I actually really like it.
Yeah. And with Marta's writing and recording the bulk of the keyboards and the orchestrations for the last like four albums, was it daunting to come in and contribute and offer like ideas on that front?
I was quite skeptical that they were going to take any of my keys ideas for that very reason, because Martin has been the primary keys composer for so long. But it was really nice because Martin actually stepped back entirely from the keys writing on this album. And I got to write some keys. Donnie got to write some keys, even. Donnie's also a fantastic keys composer. So it was refreshing and surprising that they gave me space to create keys. I'm really shocked they did it still, and I'm gratified that so much of it seems to have worked out.
Yeah, it's I mean, I guess it might have been like a welcome break for Martin as well.
Yeah, that's a he's Martin is so busy. He's a family man. He's got two kids, wife. He's in several other bands at the same time. So I'm glad that he felt like he could step back and give me some space here. It was really awesome of him, actually.
Yeah. And we were talking about, Danny's vocal range and like the just like the overall depth of the female vocals on Cradle songs as well. When you were in like the songwriting process of coming up with different things, how much do you have to like factor in how on songs where you have vocal parts, like how that can play off of Danny's voice the best? And like, are there different things that you take into consideration with that or?
With this first album with the band, the vocals were mapped out primarily by Dan. And so Dan would decide really what he wanted to do, and then we'd go together to figure out where I would fit into all of that. And there were some points where I got to make some suggestions, and that was a lot of fun. But Dan, for the most part on this album, really picked out where he thought I would be able to complement him best. And I think he was completely right in the places that he chose.
On the vocal front as well, are there, as far as keeping your voice in shape on the road, are there things that you've learned from Danny in your time in the band that have really helped out a lot?
The two biggest things that I have learned on the road, both from Dan and other vocalists, are first of all, you need enough sleep. Don't go to bed too late. And second thing is stay hydrated. Less alcohol, more water.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's I feel like a lot of bands now, and maybe it's just because a lot of the bands that I listen to the most are getting into like their 30s or older, but and I find this with myself as well. It's just like once you get up to that point, drinking isn't as fun anymore either. So it's a lot easier to like not indulge.
It's really not. I mean, I went totally sober for several months last year just to kind of reset myself. And these days I'll have a glass of wine or something now and then, but for the most part I'm not drinking, and that has been wonderfully life-changing going into my 30s and realizing just, life's a lot better drinking water.
Yeah. So back to the new album. When it came to your contributions, were there any particular like prior eras of Cradle that you drew inspiration from? Because I know on this one, some of the things that jump out to me off of, especially with To Live Deliciously and White Hellebore, they remind me a lot of like Midian and Damnation in a Day.
It's very gratifying to hear you say that. My favorite Cradle album is Midian. And so when I was trying to figure out how I would contribute to this album, a lot of my inspiration came from Midian. And I think that would also be true of Donnie Burbage, because him and I were Cradle fans really in that era. So we kind of brought that throwback sound into what we were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean like White Hellebore really kind of has like a vibe to it that reminds me in some ways of like her Ghost in the Fog. And and I think a lot of it might just be those are both songs that have really good female vocal parts on them. They both do a good job of like telling their story as you're going through the song. Um, so yeah, I think that is like probably where that comparison sticks out the most for me.
White Hellebore originally started off as some key hooks ideas from me that later on became the chorus. And it was mainly a collaboration between me and the bassist, Daniel Firth, who we called Dougal. And definitely when I was coming up with those keys, Midian is very much on my mind, like always. I wasn't sure if it was going to end up being kind of a duet Beauty and the Beast situation. That was Dan who took it to that step, and I'm really glad he did, because I think that chorus with both of us going back and forth is a lot of fun, and it's going to be even more fun live.
Yeah. I mean, that whole dynamic on that song too, I think really encapsulates just this overall thing that I've appreciated about Cradle of Filth from day one too, where it's like they're kind of the sonic embodiment of like gothic horror, where it's presenting something that is repugnant or off-putting with something that is like alluring and like beautiful, and it's just this perfect juxtaposition of it. Um, I don't know, like I feel like that's kind of like what the initial appeal of Cradle of Filth was to me back in the day too.
Yeah, Cradle of Filth is all about this dichotomy. It's not just black metal. It's got this contrast between dark and light, beauty and horror, despair and hope. That's so pervasive in pretty much every era of the band to differing levels. But I think that's what I've always appreciated the most about Cradle of Filth is that while you have blackened elements, it can go in so many different directions by playing off of these dichotomies.
Yeah. And with the new album, what do you think was the most surprising thing about the process of recording it, and also um, just with any of the songs on? Is there anything that the end result was surprising to you as far as like how it turned out?
I was really shocked by the final version of Non Omnis Moriar. I was shocked by how emotional it was for me in particular. I thought Dan's lyrics on that song are so strong and so introspective. I actually was crying during the vocal recordings for that song. And I really don't cry in the studio, you know, to be caught that off guard by his lyrics and the emotions in that song was a huge surprise. And then I would say a few weeks ago, I went back and I re-listened to the album and I had the exact same emotional response to that song again. So again, you really, you got to hand it to Danny Filth. What he can do, the stories he can weave, the lyrics he uses and chooses, it really is all quite powerful. And I was definitely caught off guard by that song in particular.
Yeah, yeah, his lyricism is, I think, another just aspect of him that's underrated because it can be so prosaic and like beautiful and poetic, and then at the same time he can just throw like very like I guess sort of like tawdry things in there where it's just kind of like, oh, that's it still sounds beautiful, but it's also just like that's kind of disturbing.
There's a lot of it, is so tongue in cheek too, and a bit
Yeah.
satirical at times. Dan has this great sense of humor too that also will come out in the lyrics, which I love. So
Yeah, yeah, because I know with the band has put out like home videos in the past, and they always refer to like the documentary portions as like schlockumentaries.
yeah, there's no one with more dad jokes in the metal world than Danny Filth. I promise you.
Yeah, yeah, being in a band with the sort of legacy of Cradle of Filth and the kind of stage show, I feel like there's also a lot of room to have Spinal Tap moments. Has there been any sort of like Spinal Tap moments that stand out to you during your time in the band so far?
Uh, Let me put it this way. Every band is Spinal Tap. That's every single day on the road for every single band. There's always something going on that is just absolutely ridiculous. And then when you step back from it for a couple of days or a few months later, you're like, that is the fucking funniest thing I've ever seen. It's just so many bizarre moments. I don't even know how I can go into all of them. One that sticks out in particular for me, this is more bizarre, I would guess, but also has a bit of humor to it in a way. We had a fan who gave us her dead brother's ashes after a show. And that's really quite heartfelt because I guess Cradle of Filth was his favorite band, so that's a warm and endearing thing to do. But she forgot to tell us his name, and he just kind of disappeared after handing us these hashes. And we were going to be traveling across international borders with what is human remains, which is illegal. Um, so it was a couple of weeks though that we were going around the United States with this nameless dead guy on the bus, and we ended up making him a roadie. He would hang out in Guitar World by side stage every night. So I guess this guy's post-mortem roadie career with Cradle of Filth was short-lived but glorious.
Yeah, so I got to see the band on the Darkly Darkly Venus Aversa tour back in 2011 at the House of Blues here in Chicago. And they had this big projector screen behind them. And there was supposed to be something playing on there, and I don't know what it was because it was just blue the entire time because something was wrong with the projector. But I just think back about that, about like Cradle performing totally seriously in front of a blue projector screen and like not missing a beat at all. But it was a great show, but it's just funny to think back that the backdrop for for this whole production is a blue projector screen.
Could have been worse. It could have been like the bouncing windows logo, you know? Like it could.
Yeah, speaking of live shows, you all are about to tour throughout April and May with Dying Fetus on the Chaos and Carnage 2025 tour. I know I'm checking out the Chicago stop of that at Radius. Is there anything that you're looking forward to playing live in particular on this tour?
There is a song we're playing live that is over 20 years old, has never been played live. It's way overdue for a live debut. And Dougal, our bassist, and Donnie, our guitarist, are the ones who dusted it off and said, why the hell has this never been played live? So I won't give away what it is yet. It's their secret to spoil. But it's going to be so much fun to debut this track live when it's been sitting in the collection for so long. I think everyone's going to love it.
Yeah, see that I'm excited for that now because I was going to follow up with, which of the classics are you excited to work into the live set given that you got into the band around Midian, but yeah, it's now I'm just super curious about what song that could be.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I will give away that it is from Midian. So it's a never before played Midian track. So we're going to be debuting that alongside the live debut of a couple of tracks from the new album as well.
Nice. Is there anything about the that fans should be expecting from the stage show?
We have a like all album cycles, it comes with new makeup, new stage costumes. We're going to be working out what exactly is the theatrical aspect of performing some of these new songs. Who's going to be shining in what spot, headbanging, windmilling, and stuff. It takes a few shows to work out, but by the time we get to Chicago, I imagine it'll be something of a well-oiled machine, as well-oiled as we can be.
Yeah. What is the most difficult track that's like regularly in the set list to pull off live like every time?
Vocally or keys wise?
Maybe both, because like I imagine that it's probably there's got to be something where it's difficult to do like both at the same time too, just because of how involved both of those can be in a Cradle song.
See, when there's a lot of heavy vocal parts going on, I simplify the keys that I'm playing at the same time. That's kind of like my little cheat right there. So, for example, for Ghost in the Fog, I'm playing mainly just the chords and everything. Um, so I would say keys wise and vocally wise, if there's a song that's really difficult to play, it probably is Ghost in the Fog. Um, that one has again really interesting intervals and jumps. I really got to concentrate to do it correctly. It's not that any of the notes are particularly difficult to reach, but again, the intervals themselves are so crucial to making that song work. It takes a lot of thinking power, vocally speaking, for that. And then beyond that, I think we're going to have to see how some of these live songs go with the new ones. I've never played White Hellebore live before. I've just started rehearsing it for the live shows, and I'm curious because it's got a lot of vocal parts in it again. So let's see how fast I can get my gopher brain to get both parts going at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, no, so many of those notes in Her Ghost in the Fog are just like sustained too. Like that's got to be taxing on your vocals after a while on tour.
Usually not unless I get sick because I got the flu last tour, but I am classically trained, so that's kind of helped me in terms of the longevity of my voice for weeks on end. And it's right there in a nice comfort zone because again, I think Sarah Jezebel was a brilliant writer and everything she wrote vocally for the female parts in those albums is really a lot of fun.
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice that you got post joining Cradle of Filth from anyone like Sarah Jezebel or Lindsay Schoolcraft or anyone, who was in that position beforehand?
I'm really lucky that both of those ladies are friends of mine. It's kind of weird to be friends with your heroes and your idols. I'm not gonna lie. Lindsay was actually in my wedding, which was awesome. She was one of my bridesmaids. And the things that they've told me are, to understand that for some people, the idea of a woman in extreme metal is never going to be a comfortable one. And so there's a certain section of the fan base that's always going to wonder why you're there, which on the one hand, I understand because metal by nature is a very masculine and aggressive form of music. So they just said, just be prepared to represent the feminine energy in this band with some amount of pushback. And they were right. I've definitely experienced that. There are some people that are like, less of the chick, more of the metal. And it's like, well, I am the metal. I'm in Cradle of Filth and you're not. So which one of us is really more metal here, So that was the best that was the best advice I got from those ladies. But for the most part, the fans are lovely. For the most part, they're like they love the Beauty and the Beast element. They love the female vocal parts. So it's been a really good experience overall.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like to be a big Cradle of Filth fan, you do kind of have to appreciate that counterplay between the two sides of the band and the whole like gothic horror element of it and that whole like theater of the mind thing. I don't think that you can fully pull off that vision the the band has always kind of, embodied without appreciating that.
Well, like we said earlier, Cradle of Filth is about the dichotomies. And if anyone is listening to it not appreciating the dichotomies, they might be like, I miss when Cradle was straight up black metal. Well, yeah, it evolved. It's not black metal at this point. There's blackened elements still, but if you're looking to listen to straight up black metal, there's other bands for this.
Yeah. And I mean, some of my favorite Cradle stuff is like after Danny started, like, I guess, learning how to sing normally, because he surprisingly is a good, like, just normal, like, flat voice too. I mean, I don't think it's a flat voice, but you know what I'm getting at.
He can do melodic vocals as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. I
no,
mean, he's
and
got like 5 octaves.
yeah, no, he's an insanely talented vocalist, and it's nice to hear him doing more than just the black metal stuff. Because the first album is classic. Obviously, it launched the band's whole career. Got some really great elements to it, some really promising baby band moments. But bands don't stay static. Art can't stay static. It has to evolve. And I'm grateful as a lover of all the dichotomies in Cradle that it did evolve.
Yeah. I know that I've had you for about 30 minutes now. I don't want to take up, too much of your morning because I know that you've got a lot going on with both the album and tour prep and with just family life. So, is there anything that I haven't asked about that you think is important for the fans to know about the new album or the upcoming tour?
I think you asked some excellent questions today. It was a lot of fun to dive deep into Cradle's past, into Danny's lyrics. What I want to tell the fans about this upcoming album is that I've said it before, I want to do justice to Cradle of Filth's legacy because this is a legacy band. I know I have really big shoes to fill because I have amazing predecessors to look up to. And I hope that you guys get that same nostalgic sense of just satisfaction that I want to get as a fan listening to New Cradle of Filth.
Yeah, I'm really stoked to check the album out from those first 3 songs that I've heard. So really looking forward to hearing that later today if the post office isn't lying to me and checking you all out on tour. Hopefully the blue screen thing works this time.
If not, it's just another moment to laugh,
Yeah.
and we need those.
Yeah. Good luck with the album and the tour and everything. Thanks for taking the time.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good day.
Run you, Mama, run you, Mama.